Security controls play a foundational role in shaping the actions cybersecurity professionals take to protect an organization. The lack of security controls place the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information at risk. These risks also extend to the safety of people and assets within an organization. In this video, I'm going to explain what a security control is and the differences between each type. Next, I'll discuss the goals that each control is meant to achieve with examples along the way. By the end, you'll have a better understanding of the basic security controls in cybersecurity. What is a security control? Security controls are countermeasures or safeguards used to reduce the chances that a threat will exploit a vulnerability. For example, implementing company-wide security awareness training to minimize the risk of a social engineering attack on your network, people, and information systems. The act of reducing risk is also called risk mitigation. While it's next to impossible to prevent all threats, mitigation seeks to decrease the risk by reducing the chances that a threat will exploit a vulnerability. Risk mitigation is achieved by implementing different types of security controls depending on the goal of the countermeasures or safeguards, the level to which the risk needs to be minimized, the severity of damage the threat can inflict. What are the goals of security controls? The overall purpose of implementing security controls, as previously mentioned, is to help reduce risks in an organization. In other words, the primary goal of implementing security controls is to prevent or reduce the impact of a security incident. The effective implementation of a security control is based on its classification in relation to the security incident. The common classification types are listed below along with their corresponding description. Preventative controls attempt to prevent an incident from occurring. Detective controls attempt to detect incidents after they have occurred. Corrective controls attempt to reverse the impact of an incident. Deterrent controls attempt to discourage individuals from causing an incident. Compensating controls are alternative controls used when a primary control is not feasible. Implementing the controls listed is no trivial matter. For example, an organization that places a high priority on reducing risk usually has a risk profile, which illustrates the potential cost of a negatively impacting risk and the human resources required to implement the controls. Layering is an approach that combines multiple security controls to develop what's called a defense in depth strategy. Defense in depth is a common strategy used in cybersecurity whereby multiple layers of controls are implemented. By combining controls into multiple layers of security, you ensure that if one layer fails to counteract a threat, that other layers will help to prevent a breach in your systems. Each layer of security works to counteract specific threats, which requires cybersecurity programs to invest in multiple technologies and processes to prevent systems or people from compromise. For example, endpoint detection and response solutions are great at preventing viruses and malware from infecting computers and servers. However, endpoint detection is not equipped to log and monitor traffic on a network like a SIEM, or detect and prevent an attack in real time like an IPS. Before we dive into control types, it's important to first understand the cyber risks and threats they help to mitigate. Understanding the basics of risks and threats. Risks. Risks in cybersecurity are the likelihood that a threat will exploit a vulnerability, resulting in a loss. Losses could be information, financial, damage to reputation, and even harm customer trust. Threats. Threats are any event with the potential to compromise the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, or CIA, of information. Threats come from outside an organization and from anywhere in the world connected to the internet. Insiders, such as disgruntled employee with too much access or a malicious insider, also pose a threat to businesses. Note, insider threats are not always malicious. For example, an employee clicking on a phishing email that installs malware does not mean the employee intended to cause harm. Finally, threats may also take the form of a natural disaster or a man-made risk, such as a new malware variant. Vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are a weakness or flaw in software, hardware, or organizational processes, which when compromised by a threat can result in a security incident. Security incidents are an occurrence that actually or potentially jeopardizes the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of an information system or the information the system processes, stores, or transmits, or that constitutes a violation or imminent threat of violation of security policies, security procedures, or acceptable use policies. Now that we have a better understanding of basic risk concepts, let's explore how security controls are implemented. Technical security controls. At the most basic level, technical controls, also known as logic controls, use technology to reduce vulnerabilities in hardware and software. Automated software tools are installed and configured to protect these assets. Examples of technical controls include encryption, antivirus and anti-malware software, firewalls, security information and event management or SIEMs, intrusion detection systems or IDSs, and intrusion prevention systems, IPSs. Technical control types and implementation methods. Below are two common examples of technical control types. Access control lists, or ACLs, are network traffic filters that can control incoming or outgoing traffic. ACLs are common in routers or firewalls, but they can also be configured in any device that runs in the network from hosts, network devices, and servers. Configuration rules are instructional codes that guide the execution of the system when information is passing through it. Network equipment vendors have proprietary configuration rules that manage the operation of their ACL objects. Administrative security controls. Administrative security controls refer to policies, procedures, or guidelines that define personal or business practices in accordance with the organization's security goals. Many organizations today implement some type of onboarding process to introduce you to the company and provide you with a history of the organization. During the onboarding process, you may be instructed to review and acknowledge the security policy of the organization. By acknowledging that you have read the policies of the organization as a new hire, you are then accountable to adhere to the corporate policy of the organization. In order to implement the administrative controls, additional security controls are necessary for continuous monitoring and enforcement. The process that monitor and enforce the administrative controls are management controls, which are security controls that focus on the management of information system security. Operational controls are security controls that are primarily implemented and executed by people as opposed to systems. For example, a security policy is a management control, but its security requirements are implemented by people or operational controls, and systems or technical controls. An organization may have an acceptable use policy that specifies the conduct of users, including not visiting malicious websites. The security control to monitor and enforce could be in the form of a web content filter, which can enforce the policy and log simultaneously. The remediation of a phishing attack is another example that employs a combination of management and operation controls. Security controls to help thwart phishing, besides the management control of the acceptable use policy itself, include operational controls, such as training users not to fall for phishing scams, and technical controls that monitor emails and website usage for signs of phishing activity. Physical security controls. Physical controls are the implementation of security measures in a defined structure used to deter or prevent unauthorized access to sensitive material. Examples of physical controls are closed-circuit surveillance cameras, motion or thermal alarm systems, security guards, picture IDs, locked and deadbolted steel doors, biometrics, including voice, face, iris, or handwriting, and other automated methods used to recognize individuals. Preventative controls. Examples of preventative controls include hardening, security awareness training, security guards, change management, and account disablement policy. Hardening. The process of reducing security exposure and tightening security controls. Security awareness training. The process of providing formal cybersecurity education to your workforce about a variety of information security threats and your company's policies and procedures for addressing them. Security guards. A person employed by a public or private company to protect the organization's assets. Security guards are frequently positioned as the first line of defense for businesses against external threats, intrusions, and vulnerabilities to the property and its dwellers. Change management. The methods and manners in which a company describes and implements change within both its internal and external processes. This includes preparing and supporting employees, establishing the necessary steps for change, and monitoring pre- and post-change activities to ensure successful implementation. Account disablement policy. A policy that defines what to do with users' access accounts for employees who leave voluntarily, immediately terminates, or on a leave of absence. Detective controls. Examples of detective controls include log monitoring, SIM, trend analysis, security audits, video surveillance, and motion detection. Log monitoring. Log monitoring is a diagnostic method used to analyze real-time events or stored data to ensure application availability and to assess the impact of the change in state of an application's performance. SIM. A Security Information and Event Management, or SIM, solution supports threat detection, compliance, and security incident management through the collection and analysis, both in near real-time and historical, of security events, as well as a wide variety of other event and contextual data sources. Trend analysis. The practice of gathering information and attempting to identify a pattern in the information gathered from an application's log output. The output of the trend analysis is usually in a graphic or table form. Security audit. A measurement that focuses on security standards, guidelines, and procedures, as well as the implementation of these controls. The security audit is usually conducted by trained third-party entities or by internal resources in preparation for an external audit. Video surveillance. A system that is capable of capturing digital images and videos that can be compressed, stored, or sent over communication networks for on-site or remote monitoring. Motion detection. A device that utilizes a sensor to detect nearby motion, such as a device is often integrated as a component for a surveillance system that automatically performs a task or alerts a monitoring analyst of detected movement. Corrective controls. Examples of corrective controls include IPS, backups, and recovery systems. IPS. An intrusion prevention system is a network security technology that monitors network traffic to detect anomalies in traffic flow. IPS security systems intercept network traffic and can quickly prevent malicious activity by dropping packets or resetting connections. Backups and system recovery. Backups and system recovery is the process of creating and storing copies of data that can be used to protect organizations against data loss. Deterrent controls. Deterrent controls reduce the likelihood of a deliberate attack and is usually in the form of a tangible object or person. Example of deterrent controls include cable locks, hardware locks, and video surveillance and guards. What is the difference between preventative and detective controls? A preventative control is designed to be implemented prior to a threat event and reduce and/or avoid the likelihood and potential impact of a successful threat event. A detective control is designed to detect errors and locate attacks against information systems that have already occurred. The routine analysis of the detective control output provides input to further enhance the preventative control. The goal of continuous analysis is to prevent errors and irregularities from occurring in the first place. Compensating controls. An alternative method that is put in place to satisfy the requirement for a security measure that cannot be readily implemented due to financial, infrastructure, or simply impractical to implement at the present time. The compensating control should meet the following criteria: meet the intent of the original control requirement, or provide a similar level of assurance. Examples of compensating controls include time-based one-time passwords, or TOTP, a temporary passcode generated by an algorithm that uses the current time of day as one of its authentication factors, providing a new hire with a TOTP until authentication is fully delivered is an example of a compensating control. Encryption. Database security applications, email encryption, and other tools. An organization cannot encrypt all electronic data in a PCI assessment. To compensate, they may use other existing tools to implement encryption. Performing a security control assessment. A security control assessment is a critical component to measure the state and performance of an organization's security controls. Note the following definition of the security control assessment: the testing and/or evaluation of the management, operational, and technical security controls in an information system to determine the extent to which the controls are implemented correctly, operating as intended, and producing the desired outcome with respect to meeting the security requirements for the system. Testing of security controls is a critical component of the overall governance of an organization's information security management system. Depending upon the organization type, regulatory requirements mandate consistent and continuous assessments, whereas non-public organizations are not held to regulatory requirements. Today, it is not only best practice to monitor security controls, but a necessary requirement in order to keep systems secure and free from target practice of hackers looking to penetrate any network that has weak security at the perimeter and internally. Examples of security assessments include risk assessment, vulnerability assessment, and penetration testing. A risk assessment involves many steps and forms the backbone of your overall risk management plan. Risk assessments are important because they are used to identify assets or areas that present the highest risk, vulnerability, or exposure to the enterprise. It then identifies the risk that could affect those assets. Vulnerability assessments. A vulnerability assessment refers to the process of identifying risks and vulnerabilities in computer networks, systems, hardware, applications, and other parts of the IT ecosystem. Vulnerability assessments are a critical component of the vulnerability management and IT risk management lifecycles, helping protect systems and data from unauthorized access and data breaches. Vulnerability assessments typically leverage tools like vulnerability scanners to identify threats and flaws within an organization's IT infrastructure that represents potential vulnerabilities or risk exposures. Penetration testing is a method for testing a web application, network, or computer system to identify security vulnerabilities that could be exploited. The primary objective for security as a whole is to prevent unauthorized parties from accessing, changing, or exploiting a network or system. It aims to do what a bad actor would do. The primary reason penetration tests are crucial to an organization's security is that they help personnel learn how to handle any type of break-in from a malicious entity. Pen tests serve as a way to examine whether an organization's security policies are genuinely effective. They serve as a type of fire drill for organizations. Penetration tests can also provide solutions that will help organizations to not only prevent and detect attackers, but also to expel such an intruder from their system in an efficient way. Conclusion. In this video, we have examined the three basic security controls: technical, administrative, and physical. A review of various critical sub-controls was also reviewed: deterrent, corrective, and compensating. Although it is important for security professionals to understand the definition of security controls, They must also recognize that the ultimate goal of implementing the controls is to strengthen their organization's defenses in order to reduce risk. Information security must be treated as a program which requires continuous monitoring in order to defend and protect its most valuable assets. Remain vigilant by incorporating the controls listed in this video, and you will be equipped to support and contribute to the success of your organization's risk management program.